Thank you all for coming. It's really an honor to be here. In view of my extreme fatigue after a day of teaching, I'm going to start off by reading my remarks, but hopefully at some point the Spirit will move me and we can have a real talk. I view it as a real opportunity to be here. I'm an economist turned theologian, and my work is aimed at developing a theological approach to economics. In the course of thinking through what theology can contribute to our understanding of economic life, I have arrived at the startling conclusion that theology has next to nothing to contribute to the issues of the day. By that I mean we have nothing worth saying, qua Christians, about whether we should raise the minimum wage or raise taxes on the rich or any of those nice programs that we like to advocate. There are plenty of secular voices in the public square giving voice to the idea that we should have a special concern for the poor, worry about economic justice and those things. And they have more expertise about what sort of policies are most likely to help. But, and this is the big but theology is indispensable if we want to think about a meaningful path towards a humane and just economy. That meaningful path lies through cultural conversion. And that means the priests are on the front lines. So I'm here to try to enlist you in the cause. What I want to do tonight is use Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si as my springboard for my reflections. It actually works to illustrate both of my claims. That is, it shows what sort of contributions theology cannot make to secular discussions of economics, but it also allows us to see the crucial nature of the contribution that it can make. So in Laudato Si, Pope Francis draws our attention to the degradation of the environment that has accompanied modern economic growth and to the plight of the poor, many of whom have been harmed by the spread of global capitalism. He seems to attribute these ills to the spread of the profit motive, where human goods and the integrity of nature are sacrificed on the altar of greed. In doing so, he echoes the secular narrative on the left that sees the spread of capitalism as the spread of oppression. Accordingly, the encyclical was warmly embraced by those who feel the pull of that moral narrative. But the problem here is twofold. First, while that narrative about the oppressive nature of capitalism contains important truths, it is an incomplete narrative. The spread of global capitalism has also lifted billions of people around the world, lifted them out of dire poverty. And much of that progress has been made in the last few decades, just exactly when capitalism was spreading globally. Capitalism, it turns out then, is a mixed bag. It is a force for good and also a force for evil. Okay. Second, sophisticated secular discourse recognizes the complexity of the question. And from that perspective, Francis's contributions are hopelessly naive. The only function such a contribution could have to secular discussions would be to serve as a rather clueless cheerleader for one side of the debate. Surely the gospel has more to offer than to be used to offer emotional support for a set of views that are better developed and supported on secular grounds. So on a superficial take, Laudato Si serves as an example of how not to bring theological reflection to bear on economic questions. Fortunately for us, that's not what Laudato Si is actually about. That's how it was widely read by many. And some of his rhetoric, some of Pope Francis's rhetoric invites the kind of superficial reading I just gave. The encyclical itself offers a profound theological reflection on the spiritual source of our ills. The encyclical is not about what sort of policies we should pursue to save the environment or to help the poor. It's a call to conversion or metanoia, or turning around. It's a call to turn around and see the world in a different light. And conversion is very much the business of preachers and priests. So the talk is divided into two equal parts. First, I want to lay out the nature of the conversion Francis is talking about and make a case for why it matters a great deal. And then second, I want to offer some pragmatic reflections from the pews of the parishes about how parishes could do a little bit more work to help bring about that conversion. Okay, so a tale of two paradigms. After laying out his brief on the damage that is being done to the environment and the problem of economic injustice, Francis gives us a chapter on creation, followed by a chapter on what he calls, borrowing from Romano Guardini, the technocratic paradigm. We thus have two competing paradigms, or as I prefer to call them, grammars. A paradigm or a grammar usually has a set of conclusions that are associated with it, but more importantly, it has a set of rules that orient thought. They are the background assumptions about the nature of truth, goodness, the structure of the world, and human nature that allow us to make sense of things. People operating within paradigms are rarely aware of these background assumptions. It's like the air you breathe. You just don't see it. They just seem self-evident. So, for example, our modern debates around a topic like abortion are structured around a shared paradigm, a shared paradigmatic assumption that the fundamental view of the human person is that they are autonomous, right-bearing individuals. And so, abortion seems to pit the rights of the autonomous mother against the rights of her unborn child. Okay. And that sets up the whole debate. Right to life, right to choice, off we go. Okay. What that particular paradigm or grammar obscures, though, I think is another way you could look at the situation. And instead of seeing a woman over here and a child over here, you could notice that it's a relationship. There's a profound relationship between a mother and her unborn offspring. Instead of thinking about how to allocate rights, if we take that small paradigm shift to seeing it as a relationship, we might want to think instead about what kind of a world makes women feel that they are at war with the natural functioning of their healthy bodies, and that their children, their own children, are threats to their lives. Okay. If you had that paradigm shift where relationality was at the center, you'd have a very different sort of conversation about abortion. I'm not getting to any question about what the law should be or whatever. It just would change the way we approach the subject. Okay, so that's a small example of how a paradigm works to focus our attention. Okay, so what is this technocratic paradigm? Let me begin by saying what it is not. And I beg you to hear me on this. It is not just a fancy word for technology. Okay. There were some people who understood that Francis wasn't intervening in secular debates about economic and environmental policy. They understood that he was making a cultural critique. But they were worried that in this cultural critique, he was basically sounding pretty much like a Luddite, a person who is suspicious of technology and wants to go back to simpler times. Okay. On the contrary, as Francis himself says, at least a few times in Laudato Si, modern science and technology have been a boon to humanity. We have to appreciate the advances in agriculture, medicine, engineering, and communications that enhance the quality of life for so many. It is proper for humans to use their God-given reason to better understand the world and use that knowledge in order to enhance human lives. Okay. So the problem with the technocratic paradigm isn't that it celebrates technology, it's deeper. It's that the paradigm itself blinds us to features of reality that are ultimately far more important than our ability to come up with better and cleverer machines. So I thought the best way into this would be to show you the paradigm. So here's a 60-second commercial by Intel. So hopefully lets you see the draw of the technocratic paradigm. It celebrates our mastery of the world. It puts us in control and it gives us power. It seems to open up unlimited possibilities, and it's just cool. Come on, that's cool. None of these are bad things in themselves. There's a real human good to mastering things and exercising control. One of those clips was of a guy using technology to help him walk again. That's obviously a human good. Okay. But notice what's missing. Nature has really faded away from view there. At best, we had one clip of a woman running through the woods, but notice she was looking to see what her calorie burn was, right? There's not much in the way of relationship. You don't really see people together. The guy standing up with Miracle Walking was standing up alone. You do have a crowd, but they're like screaming at the thing. So everyone is off there doing their own super cool thing. And consider the slogan, Intel inside makes amazing experiences outside. But I ask you, where was the outside there? What Intel is really promising you is not amazing experiences outside, but rather amazing power inside. You can do anything you can imagine. You can go into a virtual reality and you can be this flying guy, and, but it's all in your head. It's all virtual. Okay, so let's break down this technocratic paradigm into 3 core features. Number 1, we confront a world devoid of any intrinsic meaning. There are stars and rainbows and puppy dogs and black holes and hurricanes and spiders. We like some of those things. We are awed by some of them. We are threatened by some of them. Some we think are just gross, like spiders. Any meaning these things have is meaning they have for us. There's nothing intrinsically bad about the hurricane, but it's bad for the people whose houses got flattened by them, so we generally don't like them. There's nothing intrinsically good about a puppy dog, but we find them charming, though annoying, companions, so we kind of like them sometimes. The tendency to see the world as so much raw material available, excuse me. The tendency is to see the world as so much raw material available, subject to the limits of our technological powers, to manipulate it as we like. We beat back the spiders and breed more puppy dogs. In other words, we see the world mostly in a utilitarian light. How do things, animals and plants, serve us? How can they be made of use to us? And although the ecology movement often tries to remind us that we should value biodiversity for its own sake, listen to the arguments that actually work in the secular grammar. Most of them are actually utilitarian. Hey, we should keep the rainforest because who knows what beetle in there contains the cure for cancer. We need to fight against climate change because it's going to imperil our ability to keep living life the way we want to. Notice that when we confront the world, the focus is on ourselves. There is an outside, but it is an outside to be brought into conformity with our desires inside. And our desires inside seem to be boundless or unlimited. Nature does not set natural boundaries that tell us how much is enough. Nature is only there to be bent to serve our will. This goes back to the foundation of modernity. This mindset leads us to prioritize maximizing the means that enable us to fulfill our desires, or at least as many of them as possible. So that means in particular that money is always better. The more money you have, the more things you can have that you desire. More power is always better. Power is what helps you bend the world in your direction. This emphasis on maximizing money, maximizing power, and the whole way of thinking about the choices you make is exactly what's contained in the economic model of how humans make their decisions. It's the model of economic rationality, where I put everything on a vector and try to maximize as much as I can. Okay. It infests modern thought. It's all over. Once you see it, it's everywhere. So why is this a problem for the environment? Because it's a finite planet. It should not be surprising that an effort to extract from it material to service infinite, unbounded desires creates problems. We deplete resources, we exploit them in ways that unbalances the system. Why is this a problem for economic justice? Our habit of seeing the world as a set of objects to be manipulated makes it all too easy for us to see other people also as objects to be manipulated. We defend against that tendency by invoking the language of rights, but that only goes so far. Firms don't see people, they see customers. Politicians and pundits don't see people, they see voters. We extend our habit of manipulating the objects in the world to serve our desires to an increasing tendency to seek to manipulate people in the world to serve our desires. And if they aren't able to serve our desires one way or another, we have a habit of not seeing them at all. The second feature of the technocratic paradigm is that it invites us to see through form, reducing things to quantifiable values that we can manipulate. Don't you love academic talk? Let me do that again. The technocratic paradigm invites us to see through form, reducing things to quantifiable values that we can manipulate. So that sounds pretty technical, but it's actually a really, really important point. Okay, so what do I mean? One of the keys to the spread of the technocratic paradigm was the discovery that if we focus on particular features of objects in the world, we can manipulate them. Looking at an apple as an object with dimension and mass is what allowed Newton to discover the law of gravity, for example. This technique of reducing objects to just one feature, preferably a measurable feature, has spread. So now the physicist looking at the apple might see its mass. A doctor might look at it and see its nutritional value. An economist might look at it and see its market value. What we tend not to see is the apple itself as an apple. The problem is that in reducing the apple to this measurement causes us to miss the fullness of the apple. So, and to see this, consider the problem of explaining to a Martian what an apple actually is. I mean, it's really hard. When we see an apple, we just know that's an apple. That's the form. The form just gives you the whatness of it. And though form sounds empty, in context, it's actually fullness. So I can, for you earthlings, I can say apple, and you guys know what I'm talking about. But if I try to describe the apple to the Martian, I can describe it as a fruit. It's sweet. Maybe it's a red apple. It's round. It has a stem. Has core. I can put in all these measurements. It's the size of my fist. It weighs so many ounces. It has so many calories. But if I described a fruit you've never seen before in such terms, you still really wouldn't know that fruit. So I looked up on the internet. There's a fruit called an ackee. I don't know if any of you guys know what an ackee is. I have no idea. But you know, it could read all these dimensions, and I'm still clueless about what an ackee is. I could look at a picture, and that got me a little bit closer to ackiness, because I could see what it... but obviously, for me to know what an ackee is, I have to be able to hold it, smell it, touch it, taste it, right? There's a whole world in the ackee that can't be captured by these measurements. Our habit of reducing things to various measurable components and treating these reductions as the things that are real ends up impoverishing us. We miss the fullness of the things that are around us. The what of the thing that is their form is the source of a deep goodness. And we tend to be blind to it, seeking the good we imagine right around the corner rather than encountering the good right here, right now. So here's the deal. I got 2 PhDs so I could tell you that you need to stop and smell the roses. Okay. We can see the problem most readily when we consider what happens when we reduce people to various measurable features. I can see the people around me as part of the congestion on the freeway, or as potential customers for my story, or as mouths that need to be fed if I'm charitable. I can say, I'm going to have 100 beds for the overnight shelter. In doing so, though, if I think in terms of numbers, if I look at them this way, I miss the treasure that these individual human beings are. I don't hear their stories or marvel at the goodness they bring about in themselves and the world. In looking at creating beings, especially persons as objects, we lose the opportunity to be drawn out of ourselves into the goodness that we encounter lying outside. We lose the ability to be surprised or drawn into wonder. And it ends up being really impoverishing, right? We're locked up in our heads trying to maximize our desires, and we're not encountering the goodness that's right there, and so we're perpetually starving to death. Okay. The third feature of the technocratic paradigm is that it causes fragmentation, and it does this in 2 ways. First, because our principal paradigmatic view of the world is that of us confronting the world, it encourages a view of ourselves that is overly individualistic, as per that commercial. To the extent that we objectify others, we don't see how deeply related to them we really are. If we look at the world as a set of objects to be mastered, we fail to recognize our relationship with them. And though we can see that these objects are in relationship to each other, we tend not to see that as deeply as we might. To use Francis's system, we miss the ecology of it. We miss the balance and harmony of things, the way they relate to each other and form this complex, endlessly deep reality. To be open to relationship requires receptivity. It's a give and take. And it should be at the foreground of our vision, but for us it tends to be at the periphery, at least to the extent that we're affected by this technocratic paradigm. The result is, again, that it is too easy to treat others as objects to be manipulated, and it is impoverishing because the give and take of relationship is essential to who we are. We do not know who we are until we have a quarrel with our spouse or somebody. It's just the back and forth is what makes us. We can't shape the world, we must also be shaped by it. So the technocratic paradigm causes us to miss an essential aspect of being human. Second, our knowledge becomes fragmented. I'm an economist, I see the price of the apple and the cost of producing it. The nutritionist sees the nutritional value of the apple, the physicist sees its mass and dimension. We become experts in those aspects of reality that we know about, but we have no science that can fit this knowledge together. We've all reduced it to our mathematical paradigms. We've done our maximization exercises on them, but we don't know how to fit it together into an actual whole. It is thus not surprising that various experts can propose solutions to our problems that have unforeseen impacts on other dimensions of the situation. The engineer figures out that the best way to build the dam, but doesn't see the impact on the salmon swimming upstream. Okay. Some of this we can compensate for as we learn from experience, but there will be many costly errors along the way because nobody can look at a situation in its complicated wholeness. I would say, especially if you're dealing with a problem like poverty, the inability to see the situation in its whole and all its dimensions is a big reason why we make very little progress in dealing with it. Taken together, we begin to see why the technocratic paradigm is likely to create a world filled with environmental degradation and economic injustice. We move through the world without seeing its value. We don't fully see the value of other people. We don't recognize our essential relatedness to each other and to the world around us. We focus on expanding our means, our wealth, and our power, but we're never satiated. But that relentless drive means that there's always going to be pressure to push past limits or hope that when we do push past the limits that it really won't bite. And this is the ultimate tragedy. Economic growth promises us riches, but the technocratic paradigm keeps us feeling unfulfilled. And we end up damaging or destroying the real goods around us in nature and in our communities and in other people around the world. We become impoverished by the very nature of our quest for wealth. To the extent that we are gripped by the technocratic paradigm, we will find it hard to find solutions, either through better policy or better technology. And that's the great modern dream, that if we just get the right policies, the right dams built the right way, we can fix all this. But it's like playing whack-a-mole. You can beat back a bad form of that unbounded desire, and it's just going to pop back somewhere else. So from my perspective, and this is one of the big reasons I ran from economics, because I saw this whack-a-mole problem. The best way to solve the problem confronting the environment and economic injustice is to confront the source. It's to work through conversion. So that invites the question of conversion to what? What's the alternative paradigm? I think Francis tells us by offering us that second chapter on creation. So Francis is calling us to see the world anew and to have a deep change of heart. The key to this conversion, or metanoia, is to begin with the fact of creation. Okay, because many of you are seminary, I wrote this talk with a seminarian audience in mind. You'd think I don't have to spell out what it means to see the world through the creation paradigm. But I'm going to do it with a little bit of technical apparatus in the background. It's worth reflecting on this because there's a very big difference between knowing something in your head, I know God created the world, it says so right there in Genesis 1, versus knowing what it really means in your heart, being really shaped by this understanding. We live in a secular world that is saturated by the technocratic paradigm and might find ourselves way more caught up in it than we might think. Okay. So, what is creation? The starting point, of course, is that God created the world ex nihilo, out of nothing. I'm a convert. Part of being a convert was just wowing ever more deeply to what's implied by that. It means that God is the source of everything. Being, goodness, truth, beauty, there's nothing else in this world to be a source of those things. It means that the world is utterly dependent on God. We do not have to exist. We only do exist because God gives us being or existence. Because all that is contained in God or depends on God, God has no need of us because he's self-sufficient. There's nothing so wonderful about the world that isn't already in God, which means that God's choice to create it all was totally gratuitous. It's a free choice to create creatures who can share in and reflect his goodness. It's a celebratory act, a spilling out of a superabundant goodness. This idea that God is the source of everything and there's nothing apart from him means that there can never ever be a trade-off between God on the one hand and other things on the other hand, because everything is ordered to God, because that's where it comes from. And there's no independent standard of goodness that you could measure God by, because God is the source of goodness. We humans are built to seek that infinite goodness. That's how God shares his goodness with us. For us humans, that desire for infinite goodness will only be truly satisfied when we know God face to face in the beatific vision, But in the meantime, we have His goodness as reflected to us in the world, in ourselves and in the world around us, in the finite world around us. Insofar as God created the world and it reflects Him, it is good. And on this view, in this life, the quest for happiness entails conforming ourselves to the finite goodness present in the world in a way that recognizes that our ultimate fulfillment comes from God. So this is the biggest grammatical difference. In the creation paradigm, temporal happiness, temporal goodness is good. It's really good because it points back to God, but it is not the end, right? The end is ultimate elsewhere. Okay. If we think about the world and its relationship to God in this way, we can ask, how is it that an infinite God can reflect His infinite goodness in a finite creation? And the answer is that He does it in two interconnected ways. First, He creates a diversity of creatures. No one finite creature could reflect the infinite goodness of God, but each creature can reflect an aspect of that goodness. I'll talk about it in terms of shards, like a shard of the goodness. So the apple in its appleness tells us something about God that the orange in its orangeness cannot. And if I put it that way, you should start to see why form or the whatness of a thing matters so much, right? Because the only way I can learn about God with the apple is by respecting the appleness of the apple. That's what it has to say about God's goodness. This principle alone would not do the job, however, because God is not just super abundantly good such that He can't be captured in any one finite type of goodness. He's also one. And that oneness is reflected in the interdependence of creatures through the web of relationships that saturate the world. To enter fully into the goodness available in this life, we need to respect the various creatures in this world in their essential diversity, and we need to wonder at the thick web of relationship that holds the universe together. True happiness comes from seeing things as they are, not as raw clay to be molded to conform to our desires, and seeing how they fit together. Okay, so instead of reducing everything to quantifiable variables to be controlled or maximized, we should approach life as a work of art, thinking about how best to arrange the goods in our lives into harmonious wholes that reflect back God's goodness. And I want you to notice the language of art or beauty or aestheticism is going to haunt this whole talk. In the technocratic paradigm, I'm the engineer trying to achieve efficiency, I'm the economist trying to achieve efficiency, all these sort of trying to reduce things down so that it's a calculation. If I have the formula and all the right variables, I can get the right answer, and it's all in my control. But the goodness in life is seeing how things fit together and wondering at the beauty of the harmonious relationships around us. It's an aesthetic approach to see the beauty of God in the beauty of the world. Okay. The final principle that matters is that we humans reflect God in a special way, because we're special. Rocks reflect God in that they exist. Plants reflect God more deeply because they both exist and live. Animals reflect God yet more deeply because they exist, live, and perceive. And we humans reflect God even more because we exist, we live, we perceive, and we are able to know and love. Our minds can rise to the knowledge of good and truth and beauty in a way that animals cannot. We are persons with all that entails. Okay, so that's, you guys know a lot more about creation than I do, but okay. We can use this perspective to revisit the three key features of the technocratic paradigm I identified. Number one, instead of seeing ourselves as autonomous beings confronting a world devoid of intrinsic meaning, we should recognize two things. First, obviously, we are not autonomous. It is true that we are especially in the image and likeness of God, and that agency and mastery are proper to us. But that's against the backdrop of the greater first truth that we are utterly dependent on God for our very being, for everything about us. God did not create the world through a big bang in one given moment way back when and let it all go. That's more of a deistic God. Our God is creating us moment by moment, breath by breath. Everything you are is a gift from God. All of existence is a gift. Remembering that we ourselves are created and that our very being is a gift from God should change our stance toward the world. We are not its master. It's the difference between receiving a gift and you receive a gift and you respect it and you value it because it came from somebody, versus feeling like you own something because you worked for it and it's yours. There's a change in the way you hold it. We are certainly called to act in the world, But in the creation paradigm, our actions are responsive to the reality in which we find ourselves. It's more like a dance. It's a sharp contrast with the domineering stance that grows out of the technocratic paradigm. So you can see the creation stance at work if you see, if one of the source of reflections from this is Romano Guardini from his letters from Lake Como. It's a lake in Italy, and he was wandering around just marveling at the beautiful, harmonious villages that were arranged around the shores, and how the houses were structured to emphasize curves in the lake and how everything fit together. It was a human world created by receiving as a gift the natural environment around it and responding to it in love in a way that would build a city, a community that reflected that goodness back in a human and harmonious way. Compare that to the average strip mall and you have a sense of the difference that I'm talking about. Okay. Okay. The world around us, so we're a gift to ourselves. The world around us is also a gift. And notice that it's a twofold gift. It's a gift because it does support us. The apple is good because it keeps me alive. But it's also a gift because it reflects God's goodness. It has its own intrinsic, independent goodness. So it's not wrong at all to see the utilitarian good that comes in the world around it. That's part of the meaning and relationship built into it. But the world also has meaning. The sparrow sings of God's goodness, and so does the owl. This recognition should cultivate in us a sense of stewardship, working for the good of the earth, both because it serves us that way and because it's good in itself. If you want to see in a nice literary form a vision of life lived this way, I commend to you the work of Wendell Berry. This novel, Hannah Coulter, is not a bad place to start, but it's about a people who receive the world around them as a gift, the community around them as a gift, and weave their lives into relationship with it in a way that is loving and respectful and fruitful and abundant. Okay. Point number 2, form matters. Going back to my apple, if you encounter that apple through the lens of creation, you see that the form is why it's so inexhaustible. It's pregnant with the apple's unique message about God's infinite goodness. To really contemplate the apple, to really be alive and awake to it, is to be awake and alive to God's goodness. That sense of contemplation should awaken us a sense of wonder at the goodness that is all around us. There's a depth to things that we miss if we reduce them to their use values or their physical properties. Our inability to truly rejoice in the goodness around us is part of why we have this restless feeling that we need more. Part is because God's infinite, we want God, but part is because we are not letting the good that's right here in front of us soak in and nourish us. That's even more true when it comes to other human beings. Each of us communicates something of God that no other person can communicate. If we saw people clearly in light of the way they reflect God's goodness, they would be blindingly beautiful to us. I have this from C.S. Lewis. If you saw people as they really are, the wonder of them would outstrip the wonders of the mountains and the oceans. You could see the glory of their soul, or at least the potential glory of their soul. Notice that this point forces us to seek the good by encountering it in the world out there, rather than having a pre-existing notion of the good that we try to elicit from the inanimate clay. It also reminds us of the hierarchy of value. There is more goodness in persons than there is in inanimate objects. Attention to the good out there will also allow us to order our concerns appropriately, seeing material goods as the lesser goods that they are, ones that are meant to be in service of the higher goods, cultivating character, our own goodness, cultivating relationship, community, and of course faith, our relationship with God. I should pause to say that almost all of my work as a economist turned theologian is on this precise point. If we understood the hierarchy of goods, we would see that the material goods in our lives are meant to serve these higher goods, and our desire for them would be bounded or satiable. If I knew that I just need so much food and so much shelter and so much clothing and had it all harmoniously balanced out, I would be able to say, I need $60,000 a year to live, and any penny over that is like water. It's just abundance that I have no need of. Okay. And you can hear, when I put it that way, how far we are from a truly creation-oriented vision of the world. Okay. The third point is everything is relationship. We depend on our relationship with God, and it's in Him that we will find our deepest fulfillment. But our other relationships with others in this life are essential to who we are. We know ourselves in the gaze of the other. We are shaped by their impact on us. The human good should be the center of our lives in this world, second only to our relationship with God. Every person you meet has a story to tell that can pull out from you something you can't get any other way. I love the thought, come across in a couple stories, that when somebody dies, in a network of friends, when somebody dies, everybody else is diminished because that person was the only person who could say particular things about the people left behind, and when their voice went away, something was diminished all around. Okay, we might look with disdain at the poor village, the poor underdeveloped village where the people have nothing better to do. They don't have the cell phones, they can't play the computer games, they can't text out all their messages and post on Facebook. So all these poor guys can do is sit around at night and tell each other stories. But the fact that we look at them as being impoverished without noticing that there's a certain richness to that community might say more about us than it does about them. Once we see that this is the order of goods, we will be less inclined to seek our happiness in the lower good of things. And this has the incidental side effect of bringing us back into right relationship with the world around us. Once I get my desire for material goods in right relationship and am properly fed by them and know how much is enough, that relentless pressure to maximize profits and push things out that runs through the environment and runs through other communities is attenuated. Okay. Okay. Taken together, the upshot is simply this. Creation redirects our attention back onto the world, and in doing so, it redirects us to the good that can really fulfill us. The wonder of encountering a spectacular view of a mountain or discovering a new perspective on things from a friend brings us into contact with reality, but reality is God's reflection, and that's where true fulfillment lies. The technocratic paradigm, by contrast, focuses our attention on ourselves and our desires. It promises us unlimited potential, but it points to things that live mostly in our imagination. That's the appeal of the commercial. But at the end of the day, whatever we can imagine is necessarily smaller than what we could discover in the majesty and wonder of what is. So the Pope's message in Laudato Si is not that we need to stoically renounce pursuit of wealth in order to save the planet or to give to charity to others. It's that the modern project is spectacularly misguided, destructively seeking a vain fulfillment while turning our backs on the abundance that is right at hand. If we could enter into this view of the world and ourselves, we would not only do much better by the planet and by the poor, we would also do much better by ourselves. To the extent that the technocratic paradigm continues to rule our hearts, we will have an uphill battle saving the planet and achieving economic justice. So we need you to go out and change some hearts and souls. So what can you do? Okay, here we are. All right, so part 2, your job. Because we live in a secular society, most of us inhabit the technocratic paradigm to one degree or another. Regardless of how much we ascribe to the doctrine of creation or how often we go to church or all that stuff, there's a difference between knowing something and really knowing it. And it's really hard to know something deeply when it's countercultural, which these truths are. Conversion is an ongoing process of coming to inhabit the creation paradigm more deeply, and it entails going against the grain of society. Okay. So let me give you a few concrete examples to try to persuade you that, in fact, you're more deeply implicated by the technocratic paradigm than you might think. Example number 1, I always talk about having a bounded desire for material wealth, and most of my students, they kind of get it. Like, most of them do not, in fact, want to be billionaires. That's not their ambition in life. So they're like, oh, we're immune from this problem. We don't want to be a billionaire. That would be stupid. Okay. But then I ask them, how many of you would like a 10% raise? Okay. We all want a 10% raise. That means we all think we don't have quite enough, not quite enough to get what we need. It reflects our ubiquitous sense that money is scarce. And we are the richest people who ever lived on the planet ever. I can't convey to you how much richer we are. It's not even close. So just to give a quick example, in the 1920s or 30s, so within living memory, think of your grandparents or your great-grandparents, okay? Their standard of living, on average in the United States, was 5 times lower than yours, more than 5 times by now, because I started telling the statistic about 20 years ago. So, okay, that means that they lived in houses that were 5 times smaller. They had 20% of the amount of stuff that you have in your closet. They certainly did not go on the kinds of vacations you go on. They did not have all the toys you have, right? I mean, literally, they were 5 times poorer than we are. In the 1920s or 1930s, they thought they were the richest people ever. They thought they were super abundantly wealthy. But here's the rub. We're 5 times richer. Is there anybody here who's 5 times happier than your grandparents or your great-grandparents? 5 times happier. Okay. Anyway. Okay. We're fantastically richer at an amount we can't imagine, and yet it doesn't seem to have actually changed our actual lives. We would describe ourselves in the exact same terms that they did. We are the richest, most powerful people who ever lived. Pity the poor people who lived in the past who were so poor, and they didn't realize that they're the poor people who lived in the past who were so poor. Okay. All right. Anyway, you could save a lot of time, and think of all the times you hear people say, I would love to be able to afford this, but I can't afford to do this. I would love for a family saying, we would love to have the wife stay home with the kids, but you know, we need 2 incomes to get by. It would be great if we could have health care for everybody, but the national budget won't allow it. We always think money is scarce, and yet we're super abundantly rich. One example from one of my students, and this just broke my heart and made me want to cry for 3 days. She was talking with starry eyes about her deep vocational dream of teaching first graders, but she's at Villanova at $60,000 a year. She said it would not be rational for me to take a job like that. And what she meant is it would not pay enough money. Okay? So you have people sacrificing their heart's desires because money is the God at which we all worship, on the altar of which we all worship. Example 2, have it your way. That's what Burger King tells us. Have it right now. That's what Google and Amazon tell us. The culture is shaping us to think fulfilling our most fleeting whims is very important. We pass this on to our children too. When I was growing up, for my birthday, my mom might ask me what I wanted for my birthday cake, and I might get something in the ballpark. But when it came to clothes, no consultation. I got whatever she got on sale. Okay. By contrast, today it seems to me parents run around making a big scramble to make sure Johnny gets exactly the kind of party he wants for his birthday with all the specifications met. Louisa can have her heart broken if she doesn't get the right shade of pink on her little shiny kid, whatever things that the girls wear. There are a million social and cultural cues that say that my will is important. How hard then is it to live in a world where the key to truly successful living is to pray the prayer, thy will be done? So this is where we get this idea that we want everything to bend to our will, and it is reflected all the way through that technocratic paradigm. Here's an example, and this may apply to some of you and not to all of you, but it sure applies to me. Have you ever encountered the experience where you ordered something off of Amazon and they sent you the wrong thing? And have you experienced that sense of hot rage that the customer service didn't do it right and like get the right thing to you right now? Okay. It's just a measure of how we've been wired to have things go our way. Okay. Example number 3. We're trying to make all of our businesses and activities more efficient by imposing metrics to measure performance. I don't want to go too long, which I am doing. I will try to cut this short. I'm a professor over at Villanova. We're instead of talking about whether I teach well or whether I do research that opens up vistas, when it comes up to being evaluated, what people care about are the numbers on my student evaluations and the number of publications I have and the quality. It's all gone to metrics about efficiency or whatever in such a way that we're no longer pursuing the actual goods that the metrics are trying to measure. My guess is anybody involved in business has encountered this problem where you play to the numbers rather than the thing you're actually doing. Okay. And point 4, I just spent the last couple days at a conference on technology, on the digital age. Do I need to mention the ways that the spread of digital technology is fueling gas onto this whole paradigm in all sorts of ways? The technology is literally wiring our brains to expect instant gratification. It's replacing social connection with virtual reality. People actually think that the number of likes they have says something about them as a human being. And because it is steadily diverting our attention from the real world to the point where young kids no longer even want to get driver's licenses to drive because they're in their bedrooms on their text machines. It's steadily diverting our attention from the real world, which is where the real good is. It's steadily impoverishing us both spiritually and morally. Okay. Those are 4 examples off, well, not off the top of my head. I wrote them yesterday. But I'm going to guess you could find many more examples of this. And the point is just we're saturated on it. Okay, so what can be done to help deepen Christian conversion? Because this is a really hard problem. How do you get people pulled out of a cultural environment that they're so saturated in they can't even see? So number one, random starting idea, debunk the secular idea of happiness. Okay, there's lots of ways to debunk the secular idea of happiness, the technocratic idea of happiness. Yeah, I'm going to save time. You should read The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. It's a great debunking of secular ideas of happiness. It's very profound, and it works very well with my students, by the way. But anyway, you could point out some statistics. Just talk to people about whether they're happy in their lives and whether they're getting what they think they want to getting. We're the richest people who ever were. I already pointed out we are not 5 times happier than the people who are 5 times poorer than we are. Not even close. What we have instead is a rise in anxiety and depression. Suicide is mounting. The students at elite schools like Villanova, who by secular standards are said to have the good life delivered to them on a platter, they're using the mental health services at record numbers. Just talk about the deathbed test. When you die, is it really going to matter how productive you were at work, how efficient you were at getting the best bargain at Walmart? It may sound passé, but memento mori, remember that you will die, I think is a way to start to shake people out of this. Because notice the technocratic paradigm is predicated on our mass delusion that, in fact, we can keep going forever, right? We keep death to the side, we view it as a shocking event, and it's the place where we can remember that life is real and we need to think about it seriously. Okay. Point number 2. Point people back to the goodness of reality. I don't know if the talk about the relationship between God and the world, I talk about it in terms of analogy and finite and infinite. I don't know how helpful that is to ordinary people. But you would want to try to convey the basic ideas. Real things speak to us really of God in a way that virtual reality can't, because all virtual reality could do is speak to us of a human impression about a real thing. It's an echo, right? It's necessarily smaller. Try to find ways to draw people back out into nature. When I was growing up, the Girl Scouts would take me out camping and we'd have to go and get bitten by mosquitoes, and that was a good thing. I just finished reading Archbishop Chaput's book, Stranger in a Strange Land, and he has some elegant passages about the importance of nature around us and the way it reminds us of this orientation towards God and creation. So I would recommend that. But if you're in charge of a parish, I would think in terms of organizing things that get people back into the world, and especially into nature. Point number 3, this gets closer to my own area of expertise. People have known that there's an emptiness to our endless vain striving for more for a long time. There's been an unease in our culture for decades now. Back in the 90s and the 2000s, you would see a lot of books about having the movement called simplicity movement. Let's have simple lives. Let's cast out all the stuff we don't need so we'd have more time for the things that really matter. A lot of self-help books about it, very passionately engaged. That movement went nowhere, right? It didn't go nowhere. And there's good sociological and economic reasons for why it didn't go anywhere. And the reason is because we are in fact social, and a good deal of our sense of what we need is socially conditioned, okay? So I may well, having done all this research and thought about it, meditated it for a long time, I may well come to an idea about what I need to live a sustainable, valuable, beautiful human life. But if my neighbors go out and start buying a bunch of cell phones, I have to add cell phones onto my bill pile just to keep up, to be socially relevant. If you're raising kids, I think this is a very strong problem. When I was growing up, prom meant buying a $50 dress off the rack and going in the back seat of some dad's car as he drove us to the thing. Now apparently it's prom, limos and fancy dresses and all this stuff. And if your neighbors are all doing that, then you have to do that too for your kids just to fit in. It's humanly real to want to fit in. So we put this pressure on each other to keep ratcheting up our material demands, our ideas about what's necessary or sufficient. The only possible way to combat that would be through community, to have a community formed around this shared understanding so you're not putting pressure on each other to go beyond what we need. The Amish are a perfect example of this kind of community, who have picked out a beautiful and harmonious pattern of life, and they defend it by having a community that sustains them in their values. I have guys giggling up front. I'm not sure what that's about. Okay. I have long thought that parishes are the place where that could happen, or at least in an ideal world where you had a living parish, that could happen. But that brings me to my 4th point. Okay. Now this is outside of my expertise, and I know you all are being trained on specifically on questions about pastoral care and homiletics and all these stuff. So let me just say out the problem without necessarily naming the solution. At its root, the technocratic paradigm is obviously just a structure of sin. It puts the human will at the center of creation, right? And insofar as we're bred up and trained in the technocratic paradigm, we are being sustained in our ongoing rebellion against God. Salvation requires being folded back through God's grace and mercy into alignment with God's will. It requires a sense of dependence and gratitude. Our culture is very resistant to the idea of sin. And as a consequence, the idea of redemption is not the powerful call to conversion that it should be. But the task of saving the planet and restoring economic justice lies through the conversions of souls back to right relationship with God. So, you don't need an economist to come and talk to you about the world. You guys are on the front line. Preaching the gospel is mission one. Your pastoral work needs to keep that in mind. You know better than I the problems and challenges of trying to call sinners back to God in a world that does not believe in sin. You know better than I the challenges of helping parishioners see that their faith should be at the center of their lives rather than something they do on Sunday morning, maybe. It may be that in such a world, the calling to be a priest is seen as a calling to be kind of irrelevant. I don't know if you've experienced that. Like, you could have done something real, but here you are doing this nothing. But in fact, your vocation is the single most important one going. The world desperately needs the church to be the church, to witness to this alternative view of the world, the true view of the world, the abundance and grace that comes through it. So embrace your mission, and I'll be on the sidelines praying for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll open it up for Q&A, and Father Brady has the microphone. So please, if you could raise your hand, he will find you from the audience.
Thank you for your eloquent argument for spiritual transformation. If some of you are also thinking, where does that lead me to take? Does that lead me to take political action? I have an invitation. I'm Duncan Wright, and I work with the two groups, the Earth Quaker Action Team, which is a Quaker-based group that supports the campaigns to create a just and green society, and also Power, which is a 50-congregation social action group, which actually will speak here to Renova next week. So on March 28th, next week, there is a vision for a green and just society action at the Pico building. We are pushing Pico to buy 20% of its electricity.
Is there a question?
May I ask?
We had some questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi. In everything you just said, have you ever done any thinking about how it all relates to Pope John Paul's theology of the body? Seems like there is a big connection in there, especially with relationship.
The answer is no, I have not. But in principle, I think that would be very valuable. It has been best for me to be focused on economic matters in a way that stays clear of these other things so that I can have a voice that can be heard all around because of the polarization that goes on in the world. But it doesn't mean that I don't think that there's a connection. I definitely do. So.
Thank you for coming after a long day of teaching. We reciprocate that from the other end. You address it well how to address the technocratic paradigm on a practical level. I would like to ask you a question on the intellectual academic side. The fragmentary view in the technocratic paradigm seems to stem from a lack of philosophy in science today due to the rift caused in the scientific revolution. For those of us who cannot get a PhD in both economics and theology, how can we reintroduce philosophy to science in our culture today?
The fact that that's a really hard question to answer is a measure of just how challenging the technocratic paradigm is to our attempts to try to live well. The university itself is fragmented. University is supposed to mean one vision where everything is ordered around a paradigm, around philosophy or theology that gives coherence to all of the forms of knowledge. The modern secular academy is not anything like that, and it's not about to change. And you can see the effect it has if you look at, say, philosophy departments in a secular world. They're all just in their little busy little specializations. They don't even understand themselves as the architects of knowledge. They don't even try to take on that role. So you have to look for different places where that might happen. I can toot my horn and say that the Department of Humanities at Villanova is built on the vision of understanding that human knowledge has to be integrated through philosophy and theology. There's a small number of institutions that are trying to do it, but the fact that it's so hard to do, it would be impossible to do in a secular academy is a measure of just how bad this problem really is. So.
Thank you so much for your talk. As the son of a pair of Luddites, I'm kind of I've been hearing this since I was 3, but anyway. So thank you so much. I found it really compelling. So my question is more of an economic one, which is we see in a lot of third world countries when they rise out of poverty through capitalism, we see things like sweatshops and practically slave labor in a lot of those places. So my question, I guess, is there any way to jump that step? Like in a lot of these places, it feels like that, like a lot of powers in the Western world even, I think, see that almost as a necessary step to bringing some country out of the third world, out of poverty, and into more self-sustaining, power. So
yeah.
Can we skip that step? It seems pretty immoral and humane.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Although one of the classes I was teaching today is on the development of capitalism, and the West itself went through that phase in the Industrial Revolution with its own exploitation and all the rest. I do not know the answer. It would be nice if we could skip it. What I can say is our power is limited because market forces are large and beyond our control and all of the rest of it. But insofar as we're all saturated by the technocratic paradigm, we tend to take it for granted that firms are in the business of trying to maximize their profits, right? Now, in some cases, they really are just trying to maximize their profits so they have just enough to stay in business. A maximum profit could be 0 plus $1, right? It doesn't have to be a huge amount. And for those cases, it might be a question of either I have a job with substandard conditions for the workers or I have no job to offer at all. And God bless them. Those are hard choices, but I don't have a lot of moral judgment about it. Apple, on the other hand, has billions and billions in profits stacked up. They can certainly afford to pay their workers more. They just don't have to, they can afford to do it, and they ought to. Part of the reason why I go on and on and on about cultural conversion is until we get to a place where we shame people who make money by trying to maximize their profits over the backs of people, so that there's places where this conditions could be better, it's economically feasible for them to be better, that they should do it. But I think it would require cultural shaming, where we didn't just attend to how wealthy somebody was, but rather what sort of wealth that they produced and what kind of good that they created. But again, notice how very far we are. I sound like a utopian, which, that's why I'm counting on you guys to change the world.
Without trying to overthrow the idea of, I guess, the corporations being without trying to overthrow it if there was some kind of government thing, do you see like the small business as being closer to the getting out of the technocratic paradigm?
Yeah. No, in my brain, whenever I'm talking about the good side of capitalism, which there is, the good value of markets, I always have in mind small businesses. And there's many, many goods of a small business that you could imagine. They're in communities, they know the people they're working with. It's just way more balanced and way more humane. I know that there's people in the corporate world who would like to bring a more Catholic, humane vision into their workplaces, but I don't know. The scale, the size of it is just so unhuman. I don't know if that's possible or not. So I think you asked the right question. But yeah, part of my utopia would be we would have a lot of small, very flourishing businesses where we, one neighbor helps another by baking good bread and selling it to them. So.
One thing I was thinking about when I got started with the pro-life thing, we would just boycott those businesses. And that used to work pretty effectively in the beginning, back in the 80s or whatever. So why do we have to buy Apple? There's other, can't that be a good tool? Or is it dream.
I've had fantasies of boycotting the corporations. I do. I like, you know, it'd be great to just renounce them, to renounce, to renounce my iPad. To renounce Amazon bringing me the stuff that it would be hard. I mean, if you think about the ways that the corporations are all tangled into our lives, it would be hard to do. But I actually think do not do as I do, but do as I say. It would be better. I think it would be great if we had a movement to renounce corporations and move in the direction of just only doing small businesses and that. But wow, are they saturated in our lives? It's really, I mean, if you start to think about really doing it, it's hard. It would be hard to get rid of them. So, but maybe, so.
One thing, when you were speaking about conversion, you were speaking about an economic conversion, not spiritual.
I said conversion. Oh, this kind of conversion I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Sort of the surprise ending is that it is a spiritual conversion.
Yeah. The other thing was that I've come across other stories of when there are Catholics in the higher, like the king is Catholic, say, that the whole community flourishes, and that the king can call, you know, in caring about other people, rules that way, and really good things happen. So towards that, evangelization is a big thing that we could do and focus on, and change, you know, to bear, to see the fruit that will lead to conversion.
And in order to evangelize well, I think it would help if we started evangelizing ourselves. So I think people should be, I mean, everybody should be on fire. You should be on fire for God and on fire to share your love for God, right? That's the call of every Christian. That's your baptismal call. Whether you're ordained or not ordained, that's your call. But in the wake of my conversion 20 years ago, I have wandered far and wide, and I have found many, many, many parishes where there didn't seem to be much fire at all. So that's part of our world.
Hi, thank you for your comments tonight. With regard to the technocratic issue, how much do you think a lack of metaphysics plays in today's society?
It's not a lack of metaphysics, it's a wrong metaphysics. And there's, I use the word loosely because I'm not a philosopher, so I can do this, it's okay. For me, metaphysics is just saying I have an answer for how the world is. I have some idea about the structure of the world. And in point of fact, we live in a society that has a very clear understanding of the structure of the world. The world is an inanimate bunch of clay that just happens to be there. We are the only source of meaning in this world. When we die, that's it. So there is no purpose of talking about a next life. It's completely irrelevant to us. If that metaphysics wasn't so strong, it would be a lot easier for people to hear this other metaphysics. But it is that strong. And it's so strong, it shapes the views even of profound Catholics. I remember once having a conversation with a friend, profound, you know, real Catholic. We had had some kind of weird thing where it turned out that he had gotten the exact right room at a hotel at a conference that was going to be able to have a big enough space to hold my poker party for my 50th birthday. And I was like, wow, God's really provident for that. And his response is, oh, I think God's too busy to have times for small concerns like that. And I'm just like, God is, you know, that's it's such a small picture of who God is, right? And that God couldn't possibly be concerned in everything providentially. And that's a believer, like a real believer. So we're, yeah.
We're going to take one more question.
Thank you for your talk. I was just wondering, you said that in the university it's kind of like been impossible to engage in like dialogue between different you know parts disciplines in the university, but it seems like the whole idea is that we learn what we're trying to learn here by engaging the whole. So it would seem like we would have to engage in a group dialogue to get anywhere close to that. So like what are the problems that makes it impossible? I mean, and are there any solutions to what to engage in that dialogue in the university, which is where it seems like would be a great place to start?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of universities have impulses this way. There's a lot of impetus towards having interdisciplinary this or interdisciplinary that. It's like a really big buzzword right now. The problem is all of the disciplines are formed around different conceptions of how things should work, and they're not talking to each other. They're expert in their own particular piece of the pie, and they have no vocabulary or training for how to put things together. And so our students, they go into the science building and they learn about a world where what matters is what you can empirically measure and evaluate through, and then they go off into the other, like the English or those kinds of fields, and they learn that it's all relative and you can make your own meaning and do what you want. They're completely radically different paradigms for how things should go. And nobody has the tools for talking about it in a larger perspective because nobody's seriously trained in philosophy or theology. I hate to be the voice of doom and gloom, but part of the reason I'm camped out at the department I'm in is because it was just this oasis in a wilderness. My own work trying to bring economics into conversation with theology has been radically difficult because economists don't begin to understand what I'm trying to say. And it's hard to break down because the habits of thoughts are all wrong. So I wish I could be more hopeful, but it's a hard problem. So, okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful discussion. And you may not know, but I think you just made our job a little bit easier. We've been railing on about form and wholeness for quite a while, and now they see the significance of that. And the urgency.
It's not just abstract stuff in Thomas, right?
Yes, it's not just abstract. There are real problems. And you can do something about it. Please. Okay. All right. Okay, well, I thank you all for coming. Please keep the seminary in mind as you make your plans for the next several months. On the 24th of May, it's a Thursday, the seminary will host the Cardinal Foley Symposium, celebrating the World Day of Social Communication. And soon enough, we'll have our schedule of talks for next year. We do know that we have Professor Edward Fesser here in November, and Professor Stephen Barr is a physicist. So we're going to do a little bit of that bringing together next spring, next March. So more details will come for the Archbishop's lecture series held throughout the next academic year. So thank you for coming. Please stay in touch. Check our website for updates. And I want to thank Professor Hirschfeld for an engaging discussion.